Hi, Dominic. Welcome to MovieJunk. How are you?
Hey, how are you, man?
Doing great, doing great. So excited to meet you. We have Dominic Chianese Jr. joining us today. Soprano fans know you as Dominic. You're part of the New York family, and you were also in All About the Benjamins with Ice Cube and Law and Order. I can't thank you again for joining us today.
It's my pleasure, brother. It's good to see you.
Love it, and definitely can't start without saying, how much of a fan I also am of your father, your namesake, Dominic Chianese Sr. Godfather fans know him as Johnny Ola, of course, Uncle Junior from The Sopranos and Boardwalk Empire. So yeah, definitely honored. And I actually had the privilege of meeting you at this past MovieCon.
Yeah, it was great. Yeah. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here with you, man. And it was great meeting, and it's good to see you again, even virtually. I wanted to welcome you to my home in the Bronx. My father really enjoyed the Sopranos / Mob MovieCon this year, and it was great having him around. He had a place in London. He married a British woman. So he had a place in London, and he got stuck there during the pandemic. So I hadn't seen him for like 18 months.
Wow.
So yeah, he finally got here to New York for the convention and a few other things. And I'll tell you, man, for 2 weeks he ran around New York, a rock star. It was unbelievable. He gigged everywhere. He had the time of his life. 90 years old, I couldn't keep up with him.
That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, it was great seeing him. Obviously, seeing the rest of the Sopranos cast and also folks from other famous mob films. I also was excited to see him in the Talking Sopranos episode that he did as well.
Yeah,
too.
Michael and Steve got him to figure out how to do this. I still struggle with this stuff, but yeah, all the way from London, he spoke on that podcast, which I really enjoy. Michael and I go way back, and we actually did a film not too long ago, this indie film together. And of course, Steve lives here in New York. We run into each other every now and again. Great guys. They just put out a book.
Yeah, I actually saw them live in Mesa, Arizona, part of their tour. Actually,
oh, you went to that?
Yeah, I actually posted on my Instagram. I had a chance to ask them a question live, and it was answered by Michael Imperioli. And I was like, man, I never thought I'd be ever speaking to the crew like that. That was awesome.
Yeah, Michael's a gem. Like I said, I've known him way before the show. I've known him before the show was filmed. Drea is an old buddy of mine. So it's strange, seeing these people who hung out downtown, become these iconic figures in film. I mean, Michael had already been an actor, and I was familiar with his work, but he's just always just been a regular guy. And working with him recently on this project was fantastic. And Drea is the coolest, hasn't changed a bit. But it reminds me, just to bring it around to my father, because he's really the actor. I've done some things, right? I did a lot of stand-up. I did a lot of like nightclub acts here in New York, and I've done movies like I was in Thomas Crown Affair and some other really good films, and of course every New York TV show like Law and Order and Sex in the City. Like, what guy actor in New York didn't do Sex in the City? You know what I mean? The way they went through, man, you had to get at least one role.
And they're coming back too. They're coming back
they're coming back without Samantha. I'm not okay with it.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Not okay with it. She's my favorite.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a Samantha.
A lot of our favorites.
Not sorry. No apologies. So it reminded me of my father, even younger than me. I mean, it's strange. To remember my father is younger than me. He was living on MacDougal Street. He was just a character actor, did a lot of theater, so he wasn't like a celebrity who made a lot of money. He was a struggling actor for many, many years. Not to digress, but let me say that if there's any actors out there, my father plugged away at it his whole life. He was never anything else but a singer and an actor. And he got well known at 65 years old. But that's my point. He was hanging out with a bunch of other people who were also struggling actors. And I remember being a little kid going over to his house in the 70s.
Yeah.
And it was guys like Raul Julia, right? And Morgan Freeman and Al Pacino, who was starting to get known, but still, you know, there were all these like ethnic kind of New York actors who nobody knew who they were. And they went on to become these, you know, well-known and well-respected actors. And, you know, my father watched these guys come up, and, you know, he didn't become a celebrity until 65. And I got to tell you, the first season, he would still walk around. You know, he doesn't look anything like, you've seen him in real life. He's like soft-spoken, you know, well-dressed. He doesn't curse. You know, he's nothing like Junior, doesn't wear those ridiculous glasses. So we would walk around the city and people come up to us and be like, hey, you know, you look a lot like that guy in The Sopranos, you know, and he'd be like, yeah, I get that a lot, you know, joking. By the time the second season, we went to the premiere, we left the theater, he was mobbed with fans. He didn't know what to do. I had to like rush him into the limo. And I remember sitting there closing the door, and he was kind of giddy. He was like, wow. And I was like, yeah, you're a celebrity now, Pop. Welcome. You know, he was always so humble. And really good actors are like that. Jimmy was like that. May he rest in peace. I got a chance to do a couple of episodes. You know, briefly, let me just tell you a brief history. I was asked to do, and there's no shock here, but during the flashback, I think it was the second season, during the flashback scenes of when Tony was a kid.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And they needed a young Junior. So I get the call, right? So I go in, I read once, I read twice. I go in for the third time. Now they're all there. You know, David Chase is in the room. I do the lines, you know, I get them to chuckle because I do it a little improv. Then I looked at them and I went, guys, I am him 30 years ago. It's like, this is a no-brainer. This is like a casting coup. Just give me, it's 3 lines. You're like, you know. So they laughed and they gave it to me. So I was really excited about it. They had a really hard time casting Johnny, who was the main focus of, you know, of that. And the guy they hired, I was supposed to be his older brother, and I just looked too young. It was Joe, and you know, Joe passed recently, a great actor, and I was fortunate to know him. So I got bumped, and I was a little disappointed. You know, so I carried that resentment around for a little while. But then by the time the final season came out, you know, season 8 at this point, I went, Pop, I gotta do something, right? Come on, the show's about to end. So he was nice enough to call David, and so David made me, you know, one of Philly's crew, you know, the New York guys. So I got to do some scenes with Frank Vincent, may he rest in peace, and of course Jimmy. Now, the way they did it, and this is a little inside scoop, and I'm sure people have said this before, is they give you your role and you see your lines, right? And then any minute now it's subject to change because they were so secretive about, you know, I signed an NDA, but people talk and stuff gets out. So like, you know, I kept my mouth shut like a good, you know, I was already in character. It's like, I don't talk, you know, you don't say nothing. So, you know, it ended up getting cut to shreds, and I ended up being this glorified extra who did a cameo. Even the scenes that I had lines got cut. So, you know, initially I was supposed to do a shootout scene, and it ended up going to Danny Aiello's son. May he rest in peace. I mean, we lost so many people.
Yeah.
So I was glad that, you know, he got to do it, you know, but whatever. So I ended up having this glorified extra, but I'm going to tell the story to keep the thread of how humble great actors are. And Jimmy was a perfect example of this. Him and my father were close, and I would see him around. You know, we had some good times. But we were shooting down at that place on Mulberry Street, that scene where the families are meeting, and Phil's character, right, he was kind of going off on him a little bit. So we're between takes, we're sitting at the bar, and Jimmy's there, and he has this look on his face. I'm like, "What's up, man?" He goes, "I don't know." I go, "What is it?" You know, because we had a rapport. He goes, Tony wouldn't take that shit. You talked about Tony Soprano as like another guy, you know? And he goes, Tony wouldn't just sit there and take that shit. And I thought about it, and I said, do you mind if I give you my feedback? Because I had a healthy respect for him, you know what I mean? On and off screen. And he goes, yeah, sure, Dom, because that's the way he was. He would take advice from some rookie like me. I said, I don't know if you're aware of this, but you changed the mood of a scene with a raise of an eyebrow. You have such presence on screen. And he kind of looked at me like he'd never heard this before. I mean, I remember him from True Romance.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just the minute he got on screen, you're like, who the hell is this guy? By the way, I'm watching my language. Is this child friendly or?
Oh, you could say anything you want.
Well, fuck, man. I mean, there's no pretty words to describe some of this shit. Anyway, sorry, kids, don't cuss. Stay in school. So I said to him, he's talking, but I'll tell you, man, you look sideways and the whole mood of the scene changes and everybody in the audience knows exactly what's going on. And he went, thanks. Next take, they go back, and they had taken it a few times. Next takes, they go back. One take, they were like, great, cut. And he came over and he thanked me for that bit of advice. You imagine this iconic, the humility. And this is what I believe good actors are like. They don't see themselves.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And they don't, they just, so I always was taken by that. As a matter of fact, there was a time when they were honoring my father for the Ensemble Studio Theater. He was a lifetime member, and Jimmy gave him the award, and it was at Caroline's Comedy Club. And Jimmy was talking about when he first got the role. I know there's a lot about Jimmy, but I'll talk about my old man too. And he was talking about my father. And he goes, I remember when I went to go do the table read, and I walk in the room and I see Dominic Chianese and Nancy Marchand, may she rest in peace. You mentioned her. And he goes, what the hell am I doing here? Like, he didn't think that he belonged in the same room with these people.
So humble.
He's so humble. So, that was an idea of what he was like, and I even remember my father, and geez, I hope I don't get him in trouble, but he was talking about the script. He had done the Gotti picture for HBO. Do you remember that?
Amazing. One of the best mob films, in my opinion.
I agree. One of the most underrated mob films. I'm glad to hear you say that, man.
So authentic. So authentic. I watch that movie at least once every 6 months.
Oh, is that right?
It's just always playing in the background. Yeah, I love it.
Wow, I got to hang out with you in real life. Come to New York City.
Love to. I'll be back soon.
So he played the consigliere, and Armando Assante was at the convention.
Yeah, no, I saw him.
Yeah.
They might be doing a part 2, supposedly.
Oh, that would be brilliant. Is he going to be like behind bars the whole time?
He said, first of all, even though they announced it, but the script has to be perfect. And also, it's going to be a lot darker. It's going to be dealing with kind of the second half of his life. And it's going to be a completely different film, obviously, from the first one. So it's going to be a lot more emotional and darker.
Right. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Darker. Trust me, I lived down in Little Italy when Gotti was running the show. Oh, wow. And I would see him walking past my house, and he cut quite a figure. So I can't imagine it being fucking darker, except more, sad, I guess, with more pathos.
Yeah.
Of his life.
Yeah.
But I remember, my father doing that role, and I think they came down on him a little bit because he played it very soft. He was a very pensive, soft-spoken guy, and I think they were expecting him to play up that Gavone gangster bullshit. You know what I mean? He's a consigliere. This is supposed to be the
counsel,
yeah, right? So he played it the way he wanted to play it. My father was like that. My father made a decision. He stayed with it, and so they called him for The Sopranos because of that, because it was an HBO production. And I remember him going, yeah, I got this thing. This might be something. That's his exact words. This might be something. It ended up being, one of the most epic, series of all times. It changed. I honestly think it changed the face of television. It was an 8-year-long movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Nothing's touched it.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, nothing's touched it. I mean, there's shows that were created because of the success of Sopranos. The anti-hero got created from Sopranos.
Precisely. And I definitely give it to the cast, because even on paper, the dialogue was so real and so almost average. Because like when I would read it and I'd be like, this is just guys I know talking. You know what I mean? But when you gave it the life of the cast, then it became something. You know what I mean?
I'll be honest. So when I first saw your appearance in The Sopranos, when I saw your character, even because again, your scenes, every time you would say a line and then you'd get yelled at right afterwards, like Tony going down on a sheep, and then everyone looks at you. But when I saw your character, I was like, he looks really familiar. I was like, and I didn't know this at first. I was like, I think he's related to Uncle Junior in real life.
No kidding.
One of the first things that I did is I looked you up, and I was like, boom, it's this, and I saw your name on it. And I looked
wow, that's a real eye, dude. You got a real eye.
Back then, this is back when the show came out. I was like
16, 17 years ago.
I'm like, he's related to him. And I looked him up and I was like, man, so I can definitely see, I mean, you would have been, just appearance wise, awesome as the young Uncle June.
That Junior was supposed to be, yes, I could have, the one in Saints of Newark, he was supposed to be like, I think in his 40s. I can't quite get away with 40s anymore, but I could definitely get away
with the glasses. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
We actually interviewed Rocco Sisto, who ended up
Rocco, yeah, you did a great job.
Yeah, I loved him, just from Carlito's Way, Donnie Brasco.
Wow, you have some eye. You recognized him from that.
Yeah, when he came and stabbed the guy in Carlito's Way. It was a small scene, but I was like, man, I remembered you from that. And obviously he was great in Donnie Brasco and he's a big theater actor.
Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, no, definitely. I mean, it would have been cool to see you in The Many Saints.
I know. Well, it's funny that I got a call, a few of my old friends, like Annabella Shore is an old friend of mine. She was at the convention, and I know a lot of these people from past. I actually did a film with her and Lawrence Fishburne years ago. But I got the call. I tried to weasel my way in. This is like such show business crap, I've been out of the business. I have another career for quite some time now, but I've been out of the business. But as soon as I heard I tried to weasel in. They'd already cast the guy. I think the guy did a good job, but I tried to get in. Trust me. I don't know if I could play 40s.
Yeah, Corey Stroll's awesome. I think he had
a great job.
Yeah, one of the better appearances. And since we're on the topic of Many Saints, what'd you think of the film?
I loved it.
I loved it too.
Because you're a real Sopranos fan.
Mm-hmm.
And I also went in not expecting, the hype of something like this. After such a long period of time, you want to be blown away. I went, you know what I tried to do? There's a couple of reasons why I loved it. I imagined it was a couple of episodes, maybe 2 or 3 episodes as a flashback scene. So if you saw that during the season as 3 episodes in a flashback scene, it would have been some of the best episodes ever, right? Mm-hmm. Just like, wow. And it's the kind of thing you have to see again. If you're going to see it as a movie that stands alone, you might be disappointed. That's the way I look at it. I also think there were so many subtleties and there was so much to fit in. And knowing the way, doing a production during COVID, my God, I can't even imagine the behind the scenes changes they had to make, right? I thought Jimmy Boyd did a fantastic job. It's difficult for a first-time actor to carry a film, right? And also because I grew up during that time, I'm actually as old as Tony Soprano. So I grew up during that era, and I got to tell you, visually, spot on, dude.
You landed it, huh?
Oh, yeah, dude. I remember living through those times and the style of it and the language of it. I remember that was the Newark riots, but I remember when the Bronx was burning. I remember all the, the gang wars and I love, it was, some of it was, relevant. I'll tell you what I didn't like about it. And from my personal opinion, for what it's worth, Dickie Moltisanti, the main character, had no redeeming qualities, like zero. I just could not root for the guy for what. I just was like, you're despicable and I hope you die soon. And that's kind of hard to watch a home film where you're like, whereas Tony, right? Yeah. No matter what kind of sociopathic maniac he might have been, you kind of rooted for him. You're kind of behind him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I couldn't feel that for Moltisanti.
They were trying to give him a conscience, right, when he was visiting. his uncle, and when he was coaching the blind team, and he was trying to find ways to get better. But I think if we had another film or a few more episodes, maybe we could have seen that. But it wasn't like Tony. It didn't matter what Tony did. You loved him at the end.
You loved him at the end.
He could
no matter what.
strangle his mom, and you'll still like him.
Yeah, right. You'd actually be like, yeah, I get it.
Some people that I was hearing, they were a little. Just some reviews, they're a little disappointed or not understanding why it was Uncle Jr. that would eventually order the hit on Dickie. But if you know Uncle Jr., this is the same guy that ordered the hit on his nephew that he raised. So if he can order the hit on his nephew, Dickie would be.
Jr. was not a well man. He's just not a well man. There was a couple of things. At first, I kind of liked it. First of all, after the guy comes up behind him and whacks him in the trunk of his car, I noticed that it was a white dude. So I didn't think it was one of Frank's gang or and I was like, okay. And then they cut immediately to a guy walking across the street to a phone booth, and he had a cane. I was like, it's fucking Junior.
Yeah.
And before he even picked up the phone, I knew what the guy was going to say on the other line. It's done. Like, it was so
Who
classic.
did that sound like? Who did that sound like?
What? Oh, who did it sound like when it said it's done? Oh, it sounded like Silvio, frankly, but
I thought it sounded a lot like Paulie, because there's been times where
like Paulie too. Yeah,
he's delivered that.
Good. You really paid attention that line. But and I was just like, wow, that makes perfect sense. It was fucking Junior. It added so much to it almost fleshed out exactly what he ended up being. But I'll tell you, a lot of it, I was just like, yeah, this petty ass motherfucker blew him away for laughing at him when he slipped, which is totally Junior. But then I remembered the scene where they're in the car, where his brother gets out and they're in the car, and his brother's going on and on about how Dickie's moving up in the family, and and the look on Junior's face was like, we can't let them move up. We got to keep it Sopranos, you know what I mean? So there were these little hints. When you think about it later, you're like, that's when he really decided that he's got to go. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and also when Tony's mom is talking, Uncle Junior saying, let me talk to him, and she's like, he doesn't understand when you talk to him. He only listens to Dickie. That also had an impact on Uncle Junior too. He was supposed to be the father figure.
Right, precisely.
And that's he ended up being the father figure ultimately.
Ultimately, yeah. Took him a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very insightful. And that's what I liked about this thing. You know what I mean? I like that it was like you had to relate it to so much other stuff. And I think that could get convoluted in a script. And people would be like, I don't know what I'm. And, people just wanted, I don't know what people wanted. I enjoyed it thoroughly. And I was distracted when I was watching it. So I have to watch it again. I was actually on the job doing something, what I do. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm going on a bit, but it's been a long day here in New York.
No. I mean, obviously, you're the special guest. I mean, please, these stories are amazing. But I do have to admit, I did watch The Many Saints of Newark 4 times in total. And each time I rewatched it, I appreciated and liked it more and caught certain things that I didn't catch. Because the first time you watch it, you're like, you're at a super hype, you know what I mean? Waiting for you'll miss a ton of stuff, but the more you watch it, you'll appreciate it a lot more.
Precisely. The subtleties of Livia.
She nailed it.
Oh, she nailed it. She was good. Yeah, and you could really see his whole, trauma happening. Tony's, young Tony, you could see it developing. You could see all those issues that he dealt with Melfi later on. It was just, it was deep. Chase is a genius writer.
Yeah, the first time I noticed Michael Gandolfini, the actor, was in HBO's The Deuce, and then when I really felt like I was like, man,
I didn't see too much of it.
It was good. I recommend it. It's really good. There's a lot of good castmates on there. Right. But in the scene in The Many Saints where I was like, he belongs, was the scene in the kitchen with his mom. And his mom's trying to, kind of pretend this act like she's being nice to him. and he's trying to help her out, and then she kind of just lets loose, and you see the drama, the heaviness that he's been carrying for his whole life, just that sadness that he had in that scene, and that was the stem, kind of like what he dealt with his entire life with his mom.
That's very insightful.
That was the scene for me.
Sounds like you've done some workup for yourself as well.
Well, I appreciate good writing. I mean, I'm a very entry level. I read a little bit, and I've written a few stuff, so I appreciate some things. And I wonder, it's like, how would I have written that scene? And I was like, man, that was awesome.
Right. Well done. Yeah. As a fellow artist, you tend to see things. That's actually a great perspective. Well done. Whereas, like, your average viewer, not to say anything bad about your average viewer, but they just want to be entertained. They're not going to look for subtleties or twists of scenes that add such pathos and depth. Or maybe they do. Maybe I'm not giving people enough credit.
I'm not, and maybe you have, but I'm not sure if you noticed that HBO just announced that David Chase is getting a new 5-year deal to build on the story, and it sounds like it's going to be a prequel series following the Many Saints of Newark.
Nice. Well, I'm getting in on that.
And apparently Terrence Winter is on board, and I read
direct?
To write.
Right.
Because David said he wouldn't do it unless Terrence was back on board. And I also just read that Terrence just got picked up by a new agency. So something's brewing. Something's brewing with these guys. We're gonna
have to get back in the business.
Yeah, no, I'd love to see you back in there.
I tell you, I did, just to let everybody know who's watching, I spoke to the old man yesterday in London. I'm going to go visit him this holiday season. He's doing great. Still playing around the pubs. That was his thing. He loves to sing.
He's an amazing singer.
Yeah, he's got a great voice. Yeah.
He sang at the MobCon.
Yeah, always. Yeah, he'll sing at the drop of a hat. I got to tell you a story. I worked in the hospitality industry for years in New York, and we were at a place that I worked down on Park Avenue. I'll plug them, Park Avenue Tavern, 39th and Park. I actually had lunch there today. They got great burgers. So we were sitting there, and it was me, him, Paul Sorvino, and Paul was with a date. And this is probably, I don't know, 8 years ago. My father had his guitar with him. The place is packed. It's like happy hour. We're sitting by the windows. They were open onto the street. So my father starts playing, and Paul Sorvino can sing. He's got an operatic voice.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, Paul Sorvino had an amazing singing voice. So my father's playing, Paul's singing in Italian, and these guys are in there, these corporate types are in there at the bar yelling at each other. And they're doing this song. So we're, obviously appreciating it, but nobody's listening. Nobody even looks. One couple, drink in hand. I guess they were waiting for a table. They turn around and they look and they do a double take. And they're like, they like realize what they're looking at.
Wow.
And they're like, am I seeing this? Two classic actors, Johnny Ola and fucking Paulie from Goodfellas. I mean, are you kidding me? Singing at a pub at a table?
I'd go nuts if I saw that.
I know you would. You would have been like, okay, shh, everybody, shh.
And they were sitting next to each other.
Right next to each other at the table, right in the window, like everybody could see it. Yeah, we were hanging out together. Yeah, it was a brilliant. But so when they stopped, the two people clapped. Two people were like, wow. And nobody else even turned around. They were so self-involved, talking about, I don't know, the stock market or whatever.
Yeah, that's insane. Yeah, no,
I was there.
Yeah, no, I was mentioning even at the MovieCon, they were sitting next to each other at the event. Yeah, that was awesome. I mean, to be honest, I probably hung out at that section 50% of my time there, was just right there.
I really wish we would have sat down and we could have talked and picked his brain a bit. I saw a couple of guys I hadn't seen in a minute, like William Forsythe was there. I hadn't seen Bill since the 90s, man. We've had our nights. Yeah, there was a bunch of cats there I hadn't seen in a minute. It's great seeing Lorraine.
Yeah.
It was really nice.
Yeah. For any, fan, not just a Sopranos, just a mob fan, that was like just a gold mine to be at. You're with all these, Eric Roberts. Eric Roberts is there too, just casually. I mean, I was able to meet with a bunch of folks and just take pictures. I was like, man, I
I
still,
mean, the Pope of Greenwich Village is probably one of the most underrated pictures about that era. You know, I'm trying to not say anything unless I have something nice to say, but that film was fantastic. I would love to have seen him do something just as good.
yeah. One question that I love asking, everybody, but just specifically folks from The Sopranos, what did you think happened to Tony in the finale scene? Do you think he, life goes on, or do you think he was whacked at the end?
Life goes on. It was so brilliant. And people were like, "Oh, that ending." I'm like, "You're still talking about it 15 years later. You're going to tell me that's not brilliant?"
Exactly.
How do you end this? The fact that it was like, "Don't stop," like that song, and just like everybody's, and it was so random. Life went on, it never ends. I can't even imagine David answering that question over and over again. So he finally was just like, yeah, they whacked him. Shut up. You know what I mean? Think what you want. That, I think, is the beauty of it, to have it interpreted, to have everybody interpret the way they want to, or just discuss it. But yeah, it was just like more of the same. And there were so many subtle hints that everybody wants to read into conspiracies, and that's the brilliance of it. And I think that that's what's wonderful.
Yeah.
And yeah, my father, just to say this, I'd seen my old man, obviously, over his years of acting. I remember being a little kid in the theater with him watching Godfather 2.
Oof.
And, he was very convincing as that guy. You know what I mean?
Amazing. Johnny Ola.
Yeah. And, he was playing Jimmy Blue Eye. So it's like, people who knew the Meyer Lansky references and all stuff, they were like, yeah, he definitely was. Anyway, I remember the scene where the guy in black strangles him with the coat hanger. And I was just like, even at 7 years old, I was like, that guy wouldn't be able to take you like that. Like there was always like, but when I watched Junior, I'll tell you what, I looked really hard for my old man. I looked and looked, and he was not there. He put those glasses on, he was Uncle Junior. I have never seen, and I tell you, I liken it because my father did a lot of theater. So he would hone the performance, but it would be the same lines every night, right? Because it would be over and over again, but it would be the same lines. He would do films where they would do a lot of takes, but it's only one take that you see, right? This was over and over and over with different lines. He developed the character over a period of time. He had never done such a long episodic TV character. So it was the best work of his life. He got to constantly become and evolve with this character. I did not see my father at all. And just to tell this story, because Jimmy talked about it, about my father and them working together. My father commits to something, right? And Jimmy, it was the scene where they're in the hospital and they could only talk in the hospital because it wasn't bugged, right?
Oh, yeah.
So he's there with the mask on, and Jimmy walks in and he goes, "Hey, shoot done any MiGs lately?" The World War I pilot reference, And so my father takes off the mask and gives him the look, right? The Junior look, like,
You can't make any jokes to Uncle Junior, man. They were consistent with that in The Many Saints, which I like.
No sense of humor.
Yeah.
So he gives him the look. And Jimmy cracks up. It's late in the day. They were probably a little punchy at that point. Jimmy laughs. And I don't know if you know this on set, but once you laugh for something, it's contagious, right?
Yeah.
But my father made that decision to give him that look, and he wouldn't stop. Take after take, Jimmy would have to walk in, say the line, and then every single time, that same goofy look. And Jimmy cracked up like probably 8, 10, 11 times. My father would not change his decision. Eventually, they just went, cut, we'll fix it in editing, but he always admired that about my father, making those decisions and staying with it. That's a sign of a real dedicated professional. My father, my father was open-minded, but he wouldn't take any shit. I remember he was doing. I don't know if I should tell this story.
Oh, we got to hear it.
He was doing Woody Allen was directing him, and Woody's a real control freak, and he'll tell you exactly what to do.
Mhm.
Right? My father yelled at him. He's like, "Don't tell me how to act." The whole place froze. Like, did he just tell Woody Allen, "Don't tell me how to act"? He's that guy, man. He's still a Bronx motherfucker, man. He'll tell you.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Did he have, and I imagine he did, obviously in a large capacity, but was it sort of because of him, kind of why you got into acting, or did you kind of do?
Actually, that's a great question. No, it was probably because of him that I stayed away from it. I was like, Jesus, I don't, you know what I mean? First of all, you don't necessarily want to, like, I actually got into it just because I fell into it, because I was a downtown character guy. I started doing comedy. I knew a lot of actors. I got kind of roped into doing some print work, and then I had some model girlfriend, and she was like, "You should get an agent and do commercials." So I kind of did. And then I did a one-man show at this little place down. I was a front runner in that whole alternative comedy scene. I would do these like live shows. That's actually where Michael started coming. Imperial started coming to a lot. And I also was a front runner in that whole underground burlesque scene in the early 90s, like that freak show stuff. And I did a lot of those. So I used to entertain the entertainers. You know what I mean? I was a front runner before it was like, everybody did it. So I did stand up, and I worked with, and I would do these underground shows, and now they call it alternative comedy. But at the time, we were just, I didn't want to do a Letterman 7. I wanted you to be raw and weird. And I'll tell you what, I'm just going to fucking name drop because this is a, public forum. But I had the best in the business on that stage. Dave Chappelle was a regular. Nobody knew who he was, just some brother from DC. Wow. I remember he went up and did the show. And afterwards, I was like, "That's great. Can you come back next week?" He was like, "Sure." And I gave him $25, and he goes, "What, you paying me?" Like these comics were working for nothing. Louis C.K. was a regular.
Wow.
Jon Stewart did my stage. Like the list goes on. Like the best in the business before anybody knew who they were. I could go on and on, but that's what I did. And then I would do these, and I would just MC them, and I would put the shows together. And so I like to be in the spotlight. And then I started doing these underground burlesque shows. You know what I mean? And these big freak shows, and it got very popular. And like everybody who's anybody used to come in, they were legendary. But this was like before the internet, so
was this early 80s or late 80s?
Early 90s.
Early 90s. Okay.
Early
I was
90s.
gonna say if you came across Eddie, but that might have been a little bit later or earlier, because he was doing stand up in, I think, the late 70s, early 80s.
Wait, who?
Eddie Murphy.
Oh yeah, no, I never. Yeah, he was one of my heroes.
Wow.
I grew up listening to him and George Carlin. May he rest in peace. Just brilliant. Legend. Yeah, he's my biggest influence. But like, Jon Stewart had the Jon Stewart show on MTV. I did a couple of bits with him. I mean, Dennis Leary was just a guy, who did like the local shows and stuff. So I knew a lot of these guys just from like cutting their teeth. Like Dennis's whole bit was just from being a bitter fuck. He was just tired of doing stand-up. He would just get on stage and curse about everything, and that's how he got famous. But like, so I wasn't really an actor. I was a nightclub performer. But you know what? So was my dad.
Yeah.
So was my dad. He cut his teeth doing emceeing at places like Gertie's Folk City back in the 60s. As a matter of fact, somebody sent me this old newspaper from 1967 that listed all the shows going on. And it said Folk City, and he was on the bill. It was great seeing that. But he used to introduce the acts, and it was, those are the Bob Dylan days. It was like, wow. That's where we met my mother. She was some beatnik chick running around MacDougal Street. But you would see like the lineups of people performing in those days, and they were legends. And the same thing happened in my generation. I saw the birth of punk rock and hip hop here in New York, and I danced on stage with the Beastie Boys. It was a joke, you know what I mean? Rick Rubin was DJing. He was just some kid from Long Island. Like all these legendary people were in the scene downtown New York. So I think I got into it just from being around all these creative types during a time that was a renaissance in New York.
Wow.
Yeah. And, you just run into people. And I'll tell you what, kids out there, if you're listening, it's about to happen again. There's going to be a new renaissance. These are the roaring 20s. Don't get discouraged by the, overhyping of YouTube and everybody's got some, streaming web series or whatever. go out there, do live stuff, make noise. We're due for a new renaissance. Be a performer against all odds. Do it for the love of it, and maybe you'll get to be a celebrity before 65. You know what I mean? Or maybe you'll give up on the business like I did and go to do something else. But it's all a creative process. Do the art for the love of it, and that's the difference between my father and a lot of people.
That's really great advice, and you hear folks like Chappelle and Eddie when they both kind of wanted to get back. Eddie wants to get back and stand up too, and they call it working out. Going on stage, going to these small nightclubs and working out and act, and that's how you kind of get back into it.
Michael Imperial is the same way. At the height of his fame, he opened the little black box theater in Chelsea just to do the equivalent of regional theater. I mean, he did this film with me. It was a guerrilla picture, new guy, a new writer, producer, director, fantastic guy, Tom. The picture was called Between Wars. We shot it in 9 days. I mean, this guy was a genius. Michael gave an amazing performance. And it made some noise, and it was all for love. Nobody was getting paid. Nobody. And Michael doesn't have to do that. And there's a lot of people who are just, in it for the love of it. You know what I mean? Yeah.
And Dominic, can you share? Are you working on any upcoming projects, or any projects that we can see you at in the coming years, or anything that you're working or writing on?
Thanks for asking. My career demands a lot from me. And just to say it, I deal with I'm in the addiction and recovery field. So we have, in case nobody's noticed, a real problem. A real problem. A lot of people are suffering right now. So I do what I can to be part of this solution, and I try to help people. And that's a full-time job. That's why I kept you hanging so much for this, man. Sorry, the connection's unstable. Am I breaking up?
Oh, no, I can hear you now. Yeah, you're good.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So one of the reasons why it took me forever to get on with you is because it's a moving target. You know what I mean? And you never know. So that's what I do all the time. Yet, the guy I did this film Between Wars with is going to do something else. So I'm definitely on board for that. There's a couple of little downtown things. People are, doing some variety shows again because New York's coming alive again. So I said I'd bust out some of the old comedy, shtick. I used to MC my father's shows and just roast him all the time. It was just so much fun. So I'm gonna do that again. I don't know if you follow my Instagram account. My creative outlet is that basically I just take photos and write a stream of consciousness poem underneath it. That's been my creative outlet lately. And also, of course, I'm a dad. I have Dominic the Third. Dominic Chianese III, born here in the Bronx, just like his grandpa. So, between being a dad and being, and working in a field that sometimes you feel like there's a rising tide and you're just trying to spit into the wind kind of vibe, it's taxing. But yeah, I'll tell you what, you get a screenplay, pal, you run it by me, I'll do it. You heard it here. I'm a man of my word. You heard it here. You can hold me to this. I'm being recorded saying this. You come up with a project, pal, I'll work on it in a minute.
Well, we got something, written, finished. Now we're in the, I guess they call it the development or pre-production stage.
Right.
So I got a part that's perfect for you. So you're on.
Done.
No audition necessary.
You heard it. I have this on tape. He hired me.
Yep. And Dominic, I just want to be respectful of your time. I know it's late on your side. And again, I am super thankful that I was able to get you on. Honored to have you on. I definitely can do a whole second show. Just would love to kind of pick your brain on your time around all those folks during the stand-up career. And I love stand-up. I mean, my favorite comedians are Don Rickles, Rodney Dangerfield. These are the guys that I love. I'd love to pick.
We're gonna get along famously.
Oh yeah, and again, super.
A guy like Don Rickles would never even be able to get hired today.
Oh man,
Imagine.
He's awesome. Did you see his roast when De Niro and Scorsese roasted him when he got an award, or they kind of roasted him for 20 minutes? That was hilarious.
It's just epic. Yeah. Oh yeah, I'll go on and on. I'll tell you stories about my old man and Al, Bobby. You know, I can go on and on. I just really probably should sign like some kind of like disclaimer, like, you know, I just hope I don't say something that I'm gonna regret later. I'll get a phone call like, dude, did you just tell them that story? What did I tell you about that? I'm gonna get my thumbs broken. Charlie,
So,
they broke my thumbs.
some of those stories would be great over
Yeah.
over some dinner and a wine would be awesome.
Yeah, we'll do some private conversations.
Awesome. Dominic, just want to thank you again. Really appreciate having you on, and can't wait to share with the fans. You know, we got to learn some amazing stories, and looking forward to doing this again soon.
My honor, sir.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Enjoy your evening, brother.
See you.
Ciao.
Take care.